Welcome to Relationship Equity, a podcast that explores how successful people cultivate meaningful connections with others in their personal and professional lives. Learn from the stories, insights, and advice of leaders, innovators, and influencers who have built strong bonds with their teams, their customers, their communities, and their families. Here's Richard Walker.
Eric Perkins is my guest this week. He's a very familiar face to the sports fans across the Twin Cities. For 25 years, Eric was a mainstay in Minnesota broadcasting, serving as the sports director and nightly anchor at KARE 11. Eric has brought his unique talents and energy to a new endeavor, Perk At Play Productions, which we're going to talk about a lot today. His company creates content and marketing materials for businesses looking to boost their visibility and connect with their communities. Eric, Perk, welcome to the podcast.
That's almost a better synopsis for my business than what I have currently. I might just extract that from you. I like that. That was good.
Whatever it is you're selling, I would buy just based on that.
That's even better than AI. What AI thinks.
Now let me ask you about AI. That shit's frightening. I mean, I'm in technology, the world of technology. So I understand AI more than I wish I did. It's scary and brilliant and it's a many, many different things. I'm really curious to know how, if at all, it's helped you or how has it impacted your business?
Yeah, I would say very minimally, right? Just dipping our toes in it right now. And like, I do think it is daunting. I think it's intimidating, but I also think it's wonderful in so many ways. And so I'm not scared of it. I'm not shying away from it. I'm just like doing really cursory sort of like explorations into it, right? I think one implementation the other week that I did was I was stumped on a creative idea for a segment that I was doing for an auto glass company, and it was just a way to kind of reset writer's block. And so I typed in my parameters of what I was looking to try to accomplish, and it gave me a lot of good options. And then it didn't give me the option that I chose, but it made me think, and it sparked an idea for another idea that I had. It's just a feedback, kind of a bounce back thing that I like about it that I think is interesting too. I do say, yes, there's a lot of tentacles of AI and where it's going and all the ethics around it and all that stuff. But I think from a creative standpoint, one would be silly to ignore it altogether because it can frankly help in a lot of ways, I would imagine.
No, I couldn't agree more with you. Now, you are arguably one of the most creative guys on the planet. Well, not arguably, you are. Just the way you think and the way you bring different perspectives to stories. And I think that's one of the reasons you're very well respected and liked. I mean, you bring fun. And fun is such a simple three-letter word, but it's such a powerful thing. And your whole brand, I mean, we all have a brand, and I know you're big into branding. With your brand being about creating fun and laughter, I think laughter is one of the most underestimated things a trait that you can have is to make people laugh. And you do that. Has that been an intentional thing? Is it just who you are, or a bit of both?
I think it's a bit of both, frankly, Richard. I have hung my whole hat on the At Play sort of moniker. Perk At Play is the segment that kind of like just shot me into another stratosphere as far as this business goes. It was a monster in and of itself. But I do think that I've always had an affinity and an affection for fun, for levity, for joy and entertainment. I grew up in Hollywood, so I was surrounded by sort of the entertainment business, but also my dad was a longtime broadcaster for NBC News, and so I got the whole journalistic side of things too. So it was this weird dichotomy of like entertainment and news, and finding my niche in those to where I was comfortable to kind of explore some really, and frankly, let's face it, we're wired to have fun. We're wired to play. Since the day we were born with a rattle in our face, we want to shake the rattle, right? I mean, there's something about playing that enthralls us. And, we work our whole lives just so we can play, right? We work, we get all this time off, we get all this money. And then like, what are we going to do? Oh, I'm going to get on my toys and do this and go on this vacation and try this and blah, blah, blah. And it's just like, ultimately, I think that we are hardwired to have fun and to play. And so to tap into that, and frankly, in a newscast format where so much of what is pushed out there, for better or worse, is stuff that drags you down. And I saw an opening, especially within this, and I know there's a lot of business sides of sports and a lot of serious stuff with sports, but doggone it. I mean, people want to recreate, they want to have fun, and they want to experience some joy, especially near the end of a newscast when you're winding down your day and all that stuff. I mean, there's a lot of philosophies around it, but yeah, I have always sort of been wired to have fun and to extract the joy in situations, and also just involve others in the fun. That was a huge part of my brand too, was getting people in on the act.
Everything you said, I couldn't agree more with. My now retired business partner, who's a close personal friend, he has a very complex theory about adults. Adults are nothing more than screwed up kids. Why is it that a lot of people, when they get older, they feel as though they should be more serious? My wife says to me 3 times a day, "You're 5." And I say, "Thank you." I mean, look at the T-shirt I'm wearing. I'm wearing my donkey T-shirt for sure. I had a couple of important business meetings this morning, and I'm wearing my Shrek donkey T-shirt. Why not have some fun with it, right?
Yeah, we have 3 children, and so I'm just getting a whole nother level of all that, But my wife often says that she has 4 kids, right? And
You're right.
Because
Yeah.
it's just.
Now, let's face it, there are times to be serious. We know that. Everything can't be fun. But it's knowing when to have fun and how to have fun. And unfortunately, I think, you say everybody wants to, and I think everybody does. But I think there comes a time in a lot of people's lives where they're at an age or life's grounding down where they forget to have fun. And it's the easiest thing to do. It's the easiest thing to do. And to your point, when you're around people, you're either going to have fun or you're going to leave, because you can't be dragged down. There are people like you on the planet who are absolute gems, because nobody can drag you down. If you're having fun, nobody's going to be a downer on that. They just can't be, because you don't know how to come down. And that's the wonderful thing about people who are like you, is they know how to bring people up and they know how to energize people. And now when you're energized, that's when we come up with great ideas. I like what you said earlier about the AI thing, because you use AI as a tool, and that's what it is. Let's face it, it's a very powerful tool. But what it did for you, it gave you new ideas. It sparked something in your brain to come up with something. My daughter, my youngest daughter, she's an author, and she hates AI because she thinks it's, she's old school. She's really 85 years old in a 23-year-old young woman's body, and she hates AI with a passion because she thinks it's cheating, if you will. And I get that from an author standpoint, but in business, we use it in business a lot for different applications. But if it's a tool that can help spark things in your mind, it's like having a million friends around you giving you ideas, right?
Yeah, and the other thing is that is there really such a thing as an original thought anymore? I mean, isn't everything a little bit of a piracy from something that's already existed, or perhaps an inspiration from something that's already, So we're always borrowing.
Of course.
And so why not borrow from a bot every once in a while? I don't see any harm in that.
But the key is you own what you borrow. It's like any advice that we get. Take advice from all angles, everybody on the planet, but you own the advice that you take. It's your decision. If AI gives you an idea, it's your decision what you do with it. You either use it, you don't. Let's go back in time a little bit. You mentioned where you grew up in Hollywood, and Jack, your father being a big influence in your life. I'm always very curious, and I want to talk about the here and now as well, but I want to understand what's led up to the here and now. What has made Eric Perkins be the well-respected person that you are in the community and business and everything that you do in your life? Let's talk a bit about your life growing up, if you would, Perk.
Yeah, absolutely. Born in Hong Kong, my dad was covering the Vietnam War, and so he held up the family in Hong Kong because it was more of a safe haven than the battlegrounds of Saigon or whatnot. And so I stayed there till I was about 2.5. I remembered none of it. He was then moved to Burbank, where he worked on the NBC studios there, and so I grew up in Southern California. the Valley. I'm a Valley boy, and was surrounded by it. Got to visit him at the NBC studios often. Was a little bit of a studio rat. Was exposed to a lot of it. Saw the really kind of riveting lifestyle that he led in traveling all across the globe and interviewing all sorts of personalities, and just was sort of enamored by what he did, but also the notoriety that he got. I mean, that was intoxicating to a degree, right, to see that sort of, that those brushes with fame that he was having, and right, and when he would get recognized out and about, and it was just kind of like, oh, this is really neat. And so I think a seed was planted from all that. I think a very early interesting seed was he was doing a story on the Three Stooges, Richard. And
yeah, I didn't know that.
Mo Howard, if you remember Mo,
the
leader of the gang. Yeah, he was in his final days, and so my dad was doing a story on the resurgence of the popularity of the Three Stooges. Right, there was this whole kind of wave in the '70s of people that like kind of got to love it again, and it was on reruns all the time. So there was this new generation of folks discovering the brilliance of the Three Stooges, and so right, he did a story on sort of the rekindling of excitement around the Stooges, and so I got to tag along with him to Mo Howard's Bel Air poolside, retreat.
Oh, how cool was that? How old were you then, Perk?
I was just, golly, I must have been no more than 11. I don't even know the math on it, to be honest with you, but I know Mo was in his 80s and looked frail and just not at all like he used to look. And it was just, but it was still really cool. And as part of that, he enlisted myself and a few other neighbor kids to do little Three Stooges impersonations, right? Like the boink and all that stuff.
Right.
And so they used those clips in succession in a little montage of kids doing the Three Stooges things. And I was like, oh, that was my first ever, television appearance on national TV on nightly news. And I still have the clip on YouTube. I should send it to you at one point.
Oh, yeah, please do. That's fantastic.
Yeah.
Was that what you did? There's always a moment that, okay, I'm hooked. Was that the moment or was it before then or was it just a natural progression?
I think it was when I realized that I could take my love of sports and integrate it with my budding love of broadcasting. Right. And so I think once I figured out that I would go that route, that's when it clicked. I was at Pepperdine University and I was a broadcasting major, and I started to intern at NBC Sports and under a guy named Fred Rogan, who is still to this day the sportscaster of record out in Los Angeles. And I got to learn under him, and he was a goofball, and I was always intrigued by that, the fact that you could be kind of irreverent and but also really playful and lampoon things while also taking care of the day's business of sports.
Right.
So he wasn't a clown, right? I mean, ultimately you have to serve the purpose of broadcasting to masses, and you're going to rub people the wrong way if you're all the time like that. But if you have an element of that, I thought that's kind of what really kind of hooked me was my exposure to Fred Rogan. And that at that point, then I just, frantically started sending out my resume tapes. That's what you did back in the day. We didn't have YouTube links back then, Richard.
You didn't send any emails then?
Well, it wasn't even a thing. We literally packaged up a VHS tape to everywhere from, Huntington, West Virginia to Helena, Montana, wherever there is an opening.
There's people listening to this now, looking up, Googling, what's a VHS tape? That's what's crazy.
Yeah.
How technology. So let's talk about you. 25 years at KARE 11. I mean, that's a hell of a run. It really is. How many people now are going to start a job and be in the same company for 25 years?
I thought it was a stepping stone, to be honest with you, Richard. But then I realized that this is a really great station, and the sports in Minnesota, say what you will about our lack of championships, but it is second to none. I mean, it has all of the majors from MLB to NHL, to NBA, to NFL, to MLS now, and WNBA, 2 Division I universities. We've got Ryder Cups, we've got X Games, we've had Super Bowls and Final Fours. I mean, you name it. It's ridiculous the riches that this Twin Cities has had over the years, and I've been able to cover all of it, frankly, in those 25 years. Plus, I went to 5 Olympics in Athens, Torino, Beijing, Vancouver, London. I mean, just and got to, spend time at those, and it was just it was a great run.
Now, you've covered a tremendous amount in your long career. What's the most, and it's a tough question I'm going to ask it quietly, slowly, because it's no doubt a very tough answer. What's the most memorable event that you've covered, and why?
Yeah, so I would say, just from a pure sports fan perspective, seeing that touchdown pass to Stephon Diggs that put the Vikings on the precipice of a Super Bowl, and that miracle, the Minneapolis Miracle, as they call it,
at the very end of the game.
That to me was just the biggest eruption of a fan experience I've ever witnessed, and just still to this day, I get chills even thinking about it, and I'm being dead serious. I think from my personal perspective, and I could say a lot of the exploits that I did while doing Perk At Play, driving in a demolition derby and ski jumping down a mountain, all those stupid things that I put myself in harm's way for. But to be honest with you, Richard, and I got to cover a lot of great athletes over the years, right? I mean, from Michael Phelps to Michael Jordan, and that was all fine and dandy. But it was a job. It was a job. But when I got to interview my childhood sports hero, that's when it became like fanboy. Oh my gosh, what kind of pinch me moment is this? And it was like, I grew up adoring, and judge me as you will, John McEnroe. He was my all-time favorite athlete. He was playing in a seniors event at XL Energy Center. They turned XL Energy Center into a big tennis court, and they had him. I think it was Jim Courier, Andy Roddick, Marty Fish, James Blake. They had a bunch of guys playing tennis. And I got to not only interview Johnny Mac, but I got to involve him in a Perk At Play bit. And I remember, I'll never forget, like, after I interviewed him, I'm like, okay, here's the deal. Can you please blah, blah, blah. And like, I pitched him my idea of what I needed him to do. And so ultimately what he did and what I did, I had to return a serve from Andy Roddick.
Right.
Just to see if I could do it.
Right.
Just to see if it was at all possible. Ultimately, I turned my ass around and just stuck it out and see if he could hit my ass. It was just like it was just
a typical Perk play.
It was absurd. Exactly. And ultimately, Johnny Mac was then. We shot, cuts of him reacting to me trying to return these services, and just like in despair and how disgusted he was and how bad I was, and finally after the ass thing, he did his signature. You cannot be serious, and it was just like, that was like the greatest moment ever.
Oh, I bet it was.
Yeah.
I mean, he was the original bad boy of sport. I mean, whether you liked him or not, I love watching him play. You could not take your eyes off him when he was playing. My favorite Johnny Mac moment had nothing to do with tennis. It was when he was in the movie Mr. Deeds. You see the Deeds with Adam Sandler. I mean, he was just himself. You could tell he wasn't acting. It was just being
exactly
just absolutely brilliant. There's so much more to discuss about your career in television and your new business venture, but we'll have to stop here. Coming up next time on Relationship Equity, Eric Perkins will also discuss the importance of authenticity.
You have to be authentic. You have to actually have some sort of resonance of truth and validity to what you're doing and what you're saying. And yes, it can be fun, and yes, it can be comical, or there can be twists and turns in the way you present things. But ultimately, it has to be genuine.
This has been Relationship Equity. If you want to take your career, your business, or your personal relationships to the next level, reach out to Richard at yorksolutions.net. You can also get Richard's book, Relationship Equity, your cornerstone investment to great gains in business and life, on Amazon now. Relationship Equity with Richard Walker is a production of Forbes Books.